Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Curran. It is my privilege to serve as the president of Rockhurst University, and it's a distinct honor and privilege to welcome you to campus and to welcome back many to campus. You will see that there is a significant presence of Rockhurst folks here with us today, most especially on the stage, as we welcome back first our mayors, Mayor Joe Reardon and Mayor Sly James. We are very proud of both of these gentlemen for what they are bringing to our communities, but the presence of mayors does not end with these two gentlemen. We have another Rockhurst alumnus, Carson Ross, the mayor of Blue Springs, is also here. When we approached Mayors Reardon and Mayor James about coming back to campus, they readily agreed to that, and they readily agreed to be a part of this day when we said we want to host this at Rockhurst University and draw upon something that is very near and dear to us as a Jesuit institution. Rockhurst University is one of the 28 Jesuit universities and colleges in the United States. We have a certain way of proceeding, and that way of proceeding includes the engagement of everything around us as a conversation. So that when we welcome students or we welcome alumni back to campus, we recall that notion of what it means to proceed as a Jesuit institution in terms of conversation. And there are some principles around that conversation. One is that we listen very attentively, that we speak very respectfully, and that we recognize the truth in what others say. And fourthly, when we have something that is contrary to what the person with whom we are engaged in conversation has to say, we do that in a very humble and thoughtful way. They're the ground rules, if you will, for the way we proceed and operate. And we thought it was most appropriate to invite back Mayor Reardon and Mayor James to come here to campus to speak about how these two gentlemen have clearly articulated their vision for their respective jurisdictions and our region, and how we will all be the beneficiaries of that. We thought we would round out this conversation with another person who's very involved with Rockhurst University, Greg Graves, who's also an alumnus of our MBA program, and Greg also serves as a trustee of our university. Greg Graves, as you know, is the CEO and chairman of Burns and McDonnell, and he will lead us in this civil discourse. Greg Graves.
Thanks for coming, everybody. I think that the people at Rockhurst probably recognize it, but I'm not sure Kansas City always recognizes it, that one of the best CEOs in this town isn't the CEO of a business, he's the CEO of Rockhurst University. Thank you so much, Father Curran, for having us. So on behalf of the associates of UMB Bank and the employee owners of Burns McDonnell, on behalf of the members of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of all of the graduates and members of Rockhurst University, thanks for joining us today to talk about civic discourse. Did you think for a minute, as Father Tom was introducing how we enter into a discourse like this, that if only he was in Washington every day, wouldn't it be a better place? So today we're going to talk a little bit about civic discourse with two of the best leaders this city's ever seen. We're going to talk a little bit about all three of our Jesuit backgrounds, our Jesuit educations here from Rockhurst, what that's meant to us as individuals and in leadership positions. And then we're going to have a civic discourse on some difficult issues that our city and our nation are facing. Each of you will have a chance to introduce questions to the discussion. We don't have long. We only have until 5:15, but I know there are note cards for you to submit those questions. If you put a little $5 bill with your question, it will have a better chance. There's no collection plate or anything, I don't think, but you never know. So we'll look forward to those as we get towards the end of the discussion. Ready?
Ready.
Okay. You know, if there's anything I've noticed about the two of you, it is that you guys love your job. And you have an incredible passion for what you do. And so I think as we enter today's discussion, let's talk a little bit about how you guys get along, how you don't, how we're competitors, but most importantly, how we're partners, and maybe just give everybody some opening thoughts. Mayor James, we're on your home turf. Why don't you start?
Well, Joe's okay. You know, he's an all right guy. I like Joe. We get along quite well. If you don't mind, I'll stand. And first and foremost, it's really tremendous to see so many people sitting out here. What a tribute to Father Curran and to Rockhurst when he calls so many people show up. And to Joe, because I'm sure that you're here to see Joe and talk to him about some of the things going on. But I do want to report a tragedy recently. There was a train of families that were heading down to town for vacation, and unfortunately there was a big accident. So they got to heaven, and God was there, and he thought there's too many people to let in at one time. So he had to find a way to decide. So he asked all the husbands who believed that their wives ran the family to move to his right, and all the husbands who believed that they actually ran the family to move to the left. So all the husbands moved to the right except for one, and he went over to the left, and God said, well, why are you the only one? What makes you think you run the family? And the guy said, well, I really don't, but my wife told me to stand there. I don't know what that has to do with anything we're talking about, but somebody said, always start with a joke. But before I really get started, one of the things that I want to do is I want to pay tribute to Joe in this way. When Kansas City was announced as a Google recipient, shortly after Kansas City, Kansas was announced as a Google recipient, I called Joe and suggested that we find a way to collaborate, and it was an immediate, yeah, let's do that. So out of that, we have come up with the concept of the Mayor's Bi-State Innovation Team. An opportunity for both Kansas City, Kansas, and for Kansas City, Missouri to collaborate using a product that is available to us in the form of Google 1 gigabit of broadband. It's a unique product. It's a unique opportunity because it is only in Kansas City, Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri that this opportunity will exist. If we did not agree to collaborate and make the best use of that, then we would have failed in some way. So I am very pleased to tell you that Joe and I will announce this evening our co-chairs of the Bi-State Innovations team. Not the teams themselves, but the co-chairs. And the reason that this is important is because it's not enough for us to tell you that we're collaborating. We need to show you that we're collaborating so that when it's time for you to collaborate, you'll have to show us that you're actually doing it, not just telling us. So I'm very pleased to announce this evening that my friend, former nemesis, Mike Burke, is my co-chair for the Bi-State Innovations team. Mike, would you please stand up? I selected Mike for a couple of reasons. Number one, I know about his level of professionalism. Number two, I know from having dealt with him both before, during, and after the campaign that he has the capability of working with anyone. I know that he is totally dedicated to all things Kansas City and that he will do his absolute best to bring together a team that works well and functions well. And because I know that Mike Burke, at the end of the day, is the type of person who totally subjugates his ego to the mission and the mission here is all important. And that mission is very simple. It is to establish that beachhead. As a Marine, I like to use words like beachhead. Establish that beachhead of collaborative effort across state lines in the most visible, verifiable, productive way possible. So I'm pleased that Mike has accepted that position, and Joe will have an opportunity to tell you about his selection at a later date. But I just want to thank you all for being here and to tell you that Joe Reardon is, in my opinion, not only a good man, not only a Rockhurst alum, but a very good leader and one that I have a great deal of respect for. Before the elections took place and while the campaign was ongoing, I asked to have a conversation with Joe. We got together for coffee. I still don't understand why he made me pay. I suggested scotch. He didn't want to do that. But we got together and talked. And we talked about how we were going to collaborate in some areas of collaboration that just rolled off the top of our heads right then and there. This is an opportunity for us to set not only the beachhead, but to infiltrate further into the country and to take command of that entity, that thing called collaboration that we often talk about and seldom actually get our hands on. We have a product to do it, we have the will to do it, and I think we have the leaders to do it. Thank you very much.
It's great to be with you this afternoon, Father Curran, everybody at Rockhurst. I was absolutely thrilled to hear that this was going to be put together and that I was going to be fortunate enough to be a participant. And with Sly, it's been fantastic. Let me just say from the get-go, as Sly explained, in the midst of his campaign, he reached out to me and said, I want to sit down and talk. And, you know, at that moment in time, in that short conversation we had, it became very apparent that, and, you know, some of you that are involved, you know, in your midst of a campaign, it's a very political time for an elected official or future elected official, that Sly was already thinking about governing. He was already thinking about how to move the city and the region forward. And it was so instrumental, I think, to reach out in that way at that moment. And we have had several substantive conversations since then about how we can work better together. And that's something that, in the limited time that I've been around, has really never been as concrete as it is today. So the potential is absolutely phenomenal to take the region to a different place than it's been. And building it around this opportunity of Google Fiber is kind of fun. So I've been out talking to people, and I know we're going to talk about civility and we're going to talk a little bit deeper, but let me speak to Google Fiber for just a second. I've had a lot of people ask, you know, what does 1 gig really mean? Do you need all of that speed? What can it mean to you? And I have tons of examples, but let me give you an example in my own family. You know, the first time we got a cable box in our house, I was in grade school, I won the battle, and if you'll recall, the box had 37 channels on it, and my dad, I remember him saying distinctly, there's no one under God's green earth that needs 37 channels of television. Now, really? Now, honestly, half of you at least, maybe more, have a phone like this in your pocket right now, and you think nothing of the fact that either yourself or someone in your family can watch video, this is Star Trek kind of stuff, on a phone in your pocket. None of that happens except for increasing speed, to the point that I was at Schlitterbahn over the weekend, and my son, my youngest son Connor, who's 8, he's actually now the owner of my iPad. He uses it all the time. And so he found a friend of his from school, Emily, and Emily has an iPad that she stole from her mom at home too. So I asked Emily, what are you doing with your iPad? Emily says, well, I've got this great math game I'm doing. I looked at Connor, I said, Connor, what are you doing with your iPad? I'm playing Angry Birds. Have you guys seen the Angry Birds thing? So I proceeded later on, my wife Amy's here, I proceeded later on to sort of ask Connor some math questions, and he did pretty good at the very beginning. And I asked him some complicated ones, and he got lost in it. But for those of you that know Angry Birds, I asked him which color bird, when you touch on it, splits into 3, and he knew right away it was the blue bird, right? Amy and I weren't feeling very good about the parenting we were doing in our house. But the idea of the speed leading to things that you might not anticipate is very, very fundamental to the way the economy is working today, and the potential to take it to the next level. 1,100 cities applied. Only 2 are going to have this opportunity right now. and it's the two right here in this region. That provides an amazing platform to tell a story about the potential of this Kansas City region that we're ready to seize on. And the Bi-State Innovations team, the idea of having a team that can collaborate what essentially is being taught to students at this institution and all over the country, that in the world, the way that you will succeed is to figure out how you work with one another to move forward, is something we're going to do in this region like we've never done before. This team's going to be instrumental to that. I'm very excited about it. My co-chair, who's not able to be with us here today, is going to be Dr. Ray Daniels, the former superintendent of Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. He serves on the Kansas City, Kansas Community College Board as well. And over the course of the next several weeks, Sly and I will be back together to announce the rest of our team, 5 members from each state, from each city, that will form this team to really work and collaborate together. So I'm very excited to be with you here today. And I can't tell you how exciting it is for me as a resident of Kansas City, Kansas, growing up there my whole life and spending 4 of the greatest years of my life right here on this campus, to be back here to talk about how we're going to move this region forward at Rockhurst. It's just a phenomenal event, and it's a great afternoon to be with y'all. Now from the tough questions, Ryan.
All right, you do. Okay, so Mayor Reardon, let's start with you.
Yeah.
You worked very hard to get the Google project. That wasn't simple. Cities anywhere in the country would have wanted this project. And your city worked very hard to get the Google project. And now you're just giving it. You're letting the competition in and having a piece of it. Tell us why.
Well, you know, there's lessons that have been learned in Kansas City, Kansas, and there are 2 points I'll make here that I think are instrumental. One, that as you look at this region and you look at the way that KCK fits into it, we're probably a stronger player, as strong as maybe we've ever been in the region today. And I think that's important because if you look at the potential for the region to grow, all of the pieces in this region are really healthy and doing very well. The missing element is we're not connecting together very well. And in fact, in many ways, the dialogue that's gone on over the course of the last year, 2 years, maybe longer, is one that pits against one another. You know, whether it's Kansas or Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri. And quite frankly, we have a history in that in KCK too. For a long time before we unified the government, we knew how to do some things good. One of them was fight against one another really good. And all the time we spent doing that, lesson learned for us, was all the missed opportunities we had outside of us to lift up KCK and take it to the place that we want to be. I feel very much the same way about the region. We've got to change this dialogue and take the assets that are our best and figure out how we work in together to really compete with other regions across the Midwest and across the United States, and as Sly said, across the world. And if we don't do that, if we don't figure out how to change that dialogue, we're going to miss all kinds of opportunities, and we're going to set ourselves in a place that really we shouldn't be at all. And so I think what Google Fiber does, when we realized that the second city would be Kansas City, Missouri, it was amazing. It allows us to internally come together and externally paint a picture about what this Kansas City region is to the United States and the world, many of which aren't paying attention to us at all. This gives us a chance for them to start to see us in this region in a different way. And so I'm at the table because that's going to be what makes Kansas City, Kansas successful as well as the entire region.
That was the right answer, don't you think? So Sly, talk a little bit about what you think Google can mean for Kansas City, Missouri.
Well, you know, it's very interesting that as we spend a lot of time talking about all the lines that define discrete geographic areas, one of the things that we failed to do is to understand that those lines were put there to actually keep things separate. This economy, this world, separatism doesn't work. If you want to see what happens when people are divided, then look at the last few months in Washington, D.C. and tell me if that's the type of world that you want to live in day after day, or do you want to live in a world where people who live in separate houses but next door to each other share food when they need it, share water when they need it, share a driveway so that they can both benefit by having a driveway without having to do it separately. I'd rather live in the latter, not the former. Google is no more than an instrument, a means to an end. It is like any other tool. We can use it for good, or we can fail to use it at all, or we can use it for evil. I think that we are going to use it for good. When we look at the way economies are judged, this area, this metropolitan area, is the 26th largest economy in the country. Now, we've done that while we've been fighting with each other, arguing about whether a business should go to Johnson County or to Wyandotte County or to Kansas City, Missouri, and we're arguing back and forth, and we're spending money to do those types of things. What would happen if we took all the money we had spent trying to lure each other's businesses across a line, put it together and decided we were going to use that money for one specific purpose? How about education? What would education be like if we took $46 million given to a company to use strictly on education? We need to start thinking differently as we move forward, because the world has changed and is continuing to change, and the strength that we will have will come from working together, not from working apart. The economic leverages that we can realize will come from working together, not from working apart, and we will grow as a region and as two cities working together, not working apart.
Maybe we could use that money for 5 big ideas. What do you think? Let's put this. Let's hit this one head on and then put it to rest for the day. The state line is one of the best things that's ever happened to our region, and it's one of the worst. We're probably one of the only cities in America that's represented by 4 United States senators, that has 2 governors both interested or should be interested in the success of our city. 2 national rock stars, as a matter of fact. And yet it has become a curse to us. It is the subject of public discourse, often negative. It is the subject of constant competition. I saw the other day one of the states basically came out with a news release that they'd moved 5 jobs from one state to the other. And to me, it's an incredible distraction from the real work and the real things that we're trying to get done. Do you guys see light at the end of that tunnel?
I do, and I see that light because I've been working with Joe. I don't say that there's no light elsewhere, but simply because Joe and I have had this unique opportunity. We have talked a lot. We've shown up together a lot. We've talked about things that aren't related to Google a lot, and it's very clear that we both want the same things. It's really a matter of just trying to find a way to deal with that line on the street, but it can be done. Our staffs talk together. Our economic development corporations talk together. There is nothing to be lost through collaborative effort, nothing. If the deal doesn't work, we don't do it. But we know that we can go on to the next one and maybe it will work. There's all sorts of benefits to be gained by simply talking to each other. And the Google thing gave us an opportunity and a reason to do that on a much quicker, broader, and expanded scale.
You know, I'd say I agree with everything Sly's just said. I think there's a challenge to everyone that sits in this room today. I mean, we all have to make a decision, and I personally think that, you know, the way that you approach and the way that you talk and what we focus on matters. And so if we really want to go to a different place, and I think that the region really wants to go to a different place, then we need to start to have that's what I like about today. We need to start talking in that way. You know, we need to abandon, you know, the language and abandon the approaches that will divide us. Because those are easy things to do, and they feed on, you know, a sentiment that's out there. And the more that we allow that kind of dialogue to occur, the harder it becomes for thoughtfulness to happen and for us to start to really collaborate and think deeply about how we can move together. So I guess, you know, for all of you that are here today, I mean, part of what I think is important as we leave is to think about how we frame these things and what we find to be acceptable as the dialogue and what we want to be supportive of and what we don't want to be supportive of. And I think that if we start to really work on and focus on those things that bring us together and that we all collectively start to say that that's what matters and what's important, and we reject the language and the approaches that take us in a different direction, I think that will make us stronger. And I think that'll allow what Sly and I are trying to put together to become substantive and to develop a momentum that'll take us in a different place. So it's a little fuzzy, but I think it's very real. And I think that it's the kind of thing that really needs to be a takeaway that we need to consciously, and I know all of you in your business, you know this, the way that you talk about and think about what's important in your business and where you want to go can help shape the way that your organization will be. And I think that has to do with this region too.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so let's talk about Rockhurst for a few minutes. As a member of the Board of Trustees, Rockhurst is pretty darn proud these days to have the two of you as graduates in the leadership positions you've attained. I know that in my years of coming to Rockhurst to get my MBA as part of that program, some of the things that impact me as a person and in business are the incredible people you're around for all those years, the people you meet, the friends you keep forever, especially in a business environment. And the other thing that I've never forgotten was the day a priest said in our ethics class, good business and duty are not mutually exclusive in this country. And I think too often people, I hear the comment, it's just business, almost insinuating that it's okay to take advantage or not to do the right thing for the regional scope or your nation or your faith or whatever. And so I always come back to that concept of you can be a person of duty and be one heck of a business person or mayor or whatever it is. So talk about your time at Rockhurst, how it shaped you as a person, and maybe how it prepared you to be mayor.
Go for it.
Well, first and foremost, I met my wife here, Amy. She's here. She's over by Father Curran. So I'd have to say that was one of the most significant things about Rockhurst. So.
Get Amy's take on that in just a minute.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, please don't bring her up. I might get in trouble immediately. So, and John Yurchek on my staff is a graduate from here as well. So there's plenty of Jesuit influence in my office on a daily basis. Really what I would say is I look at the job that I do today, and I have great memories of being here. It was 4 of the best years of my life, quite frankly. But I think that's what's instructive to me and what I've learned after being mayor for 6 years and elected office for 8. Is that Rockhurst helps ground me in what I do. And, if you look at what's going on the national level and how political it is and divisive, at every moment in time, when you're serving as mayor, you have decisions to make. And, I think of it in terms of, how are you going to govern? And I think, Rockhurst in its influence on me in the sense of really leading me to make decisions around governing and governance that are for the good of the community and really speak to the duty that I hold in my office is probably a core value that I probably learned here more than anything. And quite frankly, the institution gave me a chance to grow personally as well. And I think that focus on not just knowledge, but knowledge coupled with individual growth and then having a moral compass in a sense of contribution to society are the things that I hold most precious to me in my experience here, and it's been extremely rewarding. Sly?
Thank you. Well, I had the opportunity to come to Rockhurst after spending 4 years in the Marine Corps, so I had one concept of service as a result of my time in the Marine Corps, and then I came to Rockhurst, where I also met my wife, who's not your wife, by the way. But she's unable to be here this evening, but so it's pretty obvious that Rockhurst was a pretty good place to pick up women. Even for those of us who were challenged by something less than handsomeness, Joe. The concept of service is what was ingrained in me at Rockhurst, where It didn't matter who your parents were. It didn't matter how much money you came from or didn't come from. You were expected to engage in some form of service to those who were in need of some form of service. And it wasn't something that you did grudgingly. It was something that you did happily. It was also a place where we were able to have free-flowing discussions about different ideas, where we could disagree with each other without being really mean and nasty about it in a controlled environment. Rockhurst was a place where I had an opportunity to take another step in my personal growth. It was a place where some of the Jesuits taught me how to drink scotch. There's no doubt. It was a place where I had a second experience in my life of meeting people who came from different areas of the country and finding out that some of the myths or stereotypes you had about other places, other people who looked different than you, spoke differently than you, were busted pretty quickly by the reality of having close contact with them and being able to talk to them about their lives. It was a place where, once again, it was reinforced after the Marine Corps that people are people. We all bleed red. We all want success for our children. We all want happiness in some form or fashion, where we all basically crave for each other's company. And it was a place where I learned that, and it was very comfortable to learn it, but it was also a place that was intellectually challenging. It was a place that helped my spirit in terms of providing me with a level of spirituality that I did not necessarily have when I got here. It was a place that was extremely important in my life and a place for which I am grateful to have been.
Wow. So let's be honest, though. Do you think in politics it could ever hold you back?
Could ever hold us back?
Could ever hold you back? Civil discourse, your approach to the mayor's race, your approach to governance, could it hold you back?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I know what you mean by hold you back, Greg.
Cost you an election?
You know what? You have to understand something. I kind of went into that election personally saying that there's only so much I'm willing to do to win, period. Because at the end of the day, I have to remain relatively true to myself. That's why when people were coming up and saying stuff like, well, you can't win with a name like Sly, you've got to change that, you can't do that. I've never heard of a politician, and black too, my God, with a name like Sly, next thing you know, you'll be singing something about a song that was in the 60s or something. And I said very simply, I ain't changing my name, and if you're that uncomfortable, vote for somebody else. It's just that simple. When you start allowing people to tell you who you are or should be, then you start trying to make efforts to become that person, which means you're no longer yourself. So I wanted to do this. I thought it would be a great thing to do. I was fortunate, in all honesty, that I knew that if I didn't, that Mike would, and that having Mike there meant that I would find a way to be involved, just as Mike knew that having me there, he would find a way to be involved. So it wasn't like an all or nothing. I knew there was a very good option. But the bottom line is that we deserve more than people who are simply good at tearing somebody to shreds to be in elected office. We deserve people.
Exactly. Joe?
You know, my sense of it is that you're here because you believe in the concept of leadership that's involved in a way that's thoughtful and that governance plays a role. I think there is a practical reality, and that is that politics is more divisive today than it has been in the past, and that for many people that are out there in the middle that don't find themselves on the edges of that, of politics, they've tuned out. There are a lot of folks that, and I understand why. I mean, there are a lot of folks that are just not as engaged that need to be engaged, and I think that that's what we're seeing that most evident at the federal level. But I think you're seeing that it's clear. You're seeing that at the state level, and my fear is that even when you get down to local government and politics, you're going to start, there's the potential for that to occur as well. And so I think that while we've got leadership in this region right now that's ready to sort of roll up their sleeves and govern and do that in a way that's collaborative, there absolutely is a risk to that in my mind. And it's really going to take us collectively to say we've got to go to a different place in order for this to work. Because the lessons learned at the federal level, to me, most recently, are not positive. And I don't think that that's, I mean, we've been down this venture a little bit in this region where we drew lines in the sand or across the state line. And it really is, it was leading us nowhere. I think, you know, what we're seeing now is a momentum here locally to say, let's go a different way. I hope that catches on. Certainly the politics at the federal level, we're not there yet. That's been clear for the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so let's go to Washington. There are a lot of business people in the room today. I know that for my business, it's not 600 points worse than it was on Monday, and it's not 400 points better than it was this morning at 8 o'clock. And yet, in Washington, every day, something has to be somebody else's fault, or somebody has to be to blame. And I was asked multiple times today, so how's business at your place? And my answer today would be, if Washington would just calm down, we'd all be better off. If they just relax a little bit and calm down, we'd all be better off. Let's talk about Washington a little bit, your guys' perspective of the last few weeks, and then we'll talk about maybe potential solutions.
Well, leadership should be able to address a challenge in a way that leaves people calm and hopeful, as opposed to scared and depressed. I don't need a leader to make me feel bad. I can do that all by myself. I want a leader that's going to say, you know what, I know it looks bad, but here's our way out. And if you help me, we can shove this door open and get out. You know, I come from a situation, and I don't mean to over-talk it, but I learned a lot in the Marine Corps about leadership, and I would not want many of the people in Washington, D.C. leading me into combat. I'm sorry. I want somebody who is able to be clear in their analysis, to consider the effects of their decisions on the people they lead, and the objective to be obtained, and then to find the best way to obtain that objective with the lowest possible loss. I don't want to have somebody leading me into combat who seems to have the primary concern of making sure that their hair is perfect, and that they are constantly running for re-election and raising money, and that they are intent on destroying their political opponents for no other reason than they are their political opponent. We deserve better than that. We should demand better than that. And we get what we deserve if we don't get better than that. There's no reason for us to continue to condone this type of behavior, except to some extent, we kind of like it. Because everybody that says, I don't like those negative commercials, can sure repeat them for you verbatim. So we have to come to grips with the idea that being an opponent does not mean that you have to be a mortal enemy. And that you have to select and find those leaders who are going to propel the conversation forward, not themselves. Even if by propelling the conversation forward, they have to take a step back personally. Leadership should be a lot more selfless than what we see sometimes in DC, and unfortunately that's not true, at least not in my mind.
Joe?
I had a classmate of mine that lives in St. Louis that obviously got the email about this event, and he sent me an email this morning, and he shared with me a recollection of a class we had together, a politics class that Thomas Ingleton lectured at. And really, the conversation that went on that class was about how governance works, about how the legislature works, and how you have to come to a compromise in the middle to make things happen. effectively. And that almost seems like a foreign discussion in the way that we've seen the last couple weeks play themselves out, and really this has been happening for far too long. Sly's exactly right, though. There is this, I think that, one of the curses of this immediacy of information and the soundbite, and we're just seeing this sort of accelerate, is the idea of coming out and drawing the line in the sand and, and making that explosive statement that really sort of puts everybody to the side. That's the sort of thing that you're going to see when you turn on the news tonight. And it won't be the thoughtful compromise. In fact, that will be what's attacked, quite frankly, is the individual that tries to say, how do we come together and find out a middle ground that we all can move down? That's what we saw play out. But the fact of the matter is the system's set up for just that. How do we take all the passion that we have for what we believe in, and as Father Curran said, listen carefully to one another, find the truth in that, and then figure out how we move forward together. That's exactly how the system's designed to function. And right now we don't have that. And those that step into that middle are punished greatly for it. And this really has to change because of our willingness to say is enough's enough. And the kind of leadership that we want is the kind of leadership that has all that passion, all that belief, but finds a way to listen and then a way to move forward. And if we can't find a way to move forward, we're going to be stuck. And again, I think what's at the city level, at the local level, for the most part, local governments don't have the opportunity to do that because we've got to get the job done. But I can just see this kind of attitude, because it can feed on itself, starting to divide us at a local level as well. And it really is unacceptable, and it's something that I think has to be remedied. It's going to take all of us collectively saying enough's enough in many ways. And the other thing I'll say is, institutions like Rockhurst can help, because this is a place that if people, committed people get together, you can start to become thoughtful about issues that, quite frankly, myself included, I'm not thoughtful about some of these issues. I hear the sound bites, and then I sort of try to orient myself around what's fed to me instead of trying to reach thoughtful conclusions about what really needs to happen. So, institutions like this that can help us be thoughtful, we need to prop that up. It's very important, I think.
Jim Heater, the president and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, and I have had the great privilege of having dinner with all 4 of our United States senators in just the last few months. And we posed the same question to all 4 of them, that we are ready for the sacrifice it will take to fix our fiscal problem in Washington. Are you willing to make us sacrifice? And yeah, from the Chamber of Commerce's point of view, that starts with, we'd like you to be business friendly so we can create jobs and do all those things, but we are ready to sacrifice. Do you think they recognize America is really ready for this and will take the hard steps now?
I won't speak for anybody in Washington, clearly, but I think that we have to be ready. I mean, as you said, Greg, if you look at, what's going on in your business today, and you look at the context in which we're operating at the federal level, there's a complete disconnect there. And I think it's getting to the point where it's completely unacceptable. And I do believe that we're going to see a different path in a different way. And obviously, having that kind of direct dialogue is very important with elected officials in Washington, D.C. The thing that's great for Sly and I is that, we're here in the city, our cities, every single day. You can find us, talk to us, approach us. In many ways, we have the pulse of the city because of that. For many of our elected officials that are in Washington, D.C., or even in the State House, that there's a level of disconnect there. And so there's only certain voices, perhaps, that they're hearing at any one given time. And so the more that we have that dialogue, the more our voice becomes part of the mix. Sly?
And one of the things, the set of voices that I'm not sure that they hear quite enough are those voices that are the ones that we hear more often on the city level. I don't mind sacrifice, but I think the sacrifice should be shared. It shouldn't be on the backs of any discrete group. It shouldn't be on those who are least able to sacrifice, because they are also the least able to fight against the unfairness of some things. I think too often that our leaders in Washington hear from those who have a great deal of money, influence, or power, and their idea of sacrifice is not the idea of sacrifice that I think some of us may have. What I hear when I'm out on the street is, Mayor, where can I find a job? Mayor, how can I make sure that I can get enough money to pay my bills this month? It's not, gee, Mayor, what do you think about the Dow crashing by 600 points? The people that we bump into when we're walking down the street and standing at a street corner talking to average people every day are concerned about the basic bare essentials of life. I hope that when we all agree to accept whatever level of sacrifice, that we insist that the sacrifice be evenly borne by all of us, that no group is favored, that no group is elevated. The gap between the wealthiest individuals in this country and those who are poor is growing all the time. And we cannot continue to turn a blind eye to that, because that gap means something. It means that the power of this country is controlled by a discrete few over the vast majority, and that is not a good way to go forward, in my opinion.
So we have a current student or recent graduate from Rockhurst who would like to know what advice you would give them if they are interested in going into politics. Don't say run. I know you're three. And where would you start? Which I think is a really good question.
Interesting. Do you want to try that?
Well, I would say after I graduated from Rockhurst, I took a year and worked for the Raytown Post. I was a writer there for a year. And then I guess if you really are wanting to get into politics, you take the path that Sly and I took and you go to law school. And so obviously law school is a great base of learning, and it can take you to many different places. And then I would say that right away I would start to get involved locally at the local level. Personally, for a student, I would encourage you to call up your council person or your commissioner and say that you want to get involved in government and see if there's an appointment to a board or a commission or some role that you can play. I don't think there's a better way for you to see how something works than to actually play a role in it. And I can tell you, having served as a commissioner and now as mayor, we don't have young people calling us as often as I would like. I'd be thrilled if you called my office and said that, and we'd find out a way to get you actively engaged. It's a great place to start, even while you're furthering your education into graduate studies.
I agree with what Joe said. I really do think that the process of legal learning is a tremendous process for politics, because it requires you as a lawyer to be able to evaluate an issue or an argument from both or all three or four sides, and then to find a solution to that problem using facts and evidence. I think that's a great thing. It also teaches you, particularly as a trial lawyer, to go do battle in a courtroom, a perfectly right and just thing to do on behalf of a client, but then be able to go out and have a beer with your opponent right after the case is over. That's a good thing for people to be able to do. I don't think that's something that's being done in D.C. as often as it needs to be done. I also think that it's important for anybody who has a desire to get into politics to understand what they're getting into. I think that there's too much emphasis on television cameras and bright lights and all those things that people associate with politics. But the reality is, and one of the things I appreciate most about Joe, and one of the things that he told me when we first sat down is that what we do is serve. And if you are not comfortable with the concept of being in a service position to others, then politics isn't where you should be. It's not a matter of power, it's a matter of service. The power comes in delivering the services efficiently and productively by finding partnerships and collaborative ways to get that done. To the extent that people want to get into politics, I think it's a noble profession, because at the end of the day, my definition, and I'm pretty sure Joe's definition of politics, is the ability to get things done for the people that we serve by working with others and working together to achieve that goal.
So you guys are both lawyers, obviously. Joe, you said that. And so a lot of lawyer jokes come to mind right away.
I've got some
but and some politician jokes, but I will save all those for. Washington is full of lawyers, right? But every once in a while, there's somebody like Mayor Pro Tem Cindy Circo who just decided Kansas City needs to be a better place. And if I want it to be a better place, I'm going to have to go help make it a better place. And so you don't always have to follow that. But do you think if somebody really wants to make a lifetime of politics, do they really have to go become a lawyer?
No, I would never say that you have to become a lawyer to become a politician. You may be a better politician if you're not a lawyer, I will admit that. But I think if you're looking at graduate studies, nearly any, you could have great examples of politicians that come from nearly any learning background. I do think trying to continue studies beyond undergrad is something that, is important. There's another fundamental to this, and this was, burned into my head by my dad, which is, there will be life after politics for most politicians. And so, having a good solid background, of learning is fundamental. This is very practical advice, by the way, is really a practical approach that you ought to take. And I certainly don't believe I'll be involved in politics my entire life. I love what I do. But I think, thinking through, your life course, moving to graduate work is something that can be very important. And I don't think you need to be any particular graduate studies is better than the other for political life.
I agree. I don't think that being a lawyer is a prerequisite to anything other than being a lawyer. I do think that there are some skills that you learn in the legal context that are beneficial, but I think there are some skills that you learn being a mother that are very beneficial in the governance and service process, or being in, well, I was going to say being an engineer, but I can't think of any. There are a number of skills that you must bring to bear in order to serve people. And I see my friend Cindy Circo out there, and she is the Mayor Pro Tem, and she is the Mayor Pro Tem because she embodies a number of those skills. She's dedicated, she works her tail off, she studies hard, and she tries to collaborate with people. And she has an innate sense about end goals and how those things fit together, and I appreciate that. So she's a good lady, and when you were talking about Google in Kansas City, Missouri, she and a group of people, office port folks and others, Rick over here, these folks are the ones who are responsible for getting Google in Kansas City in a lot of ways, along with the Kauffman Foundation and others. I know I'm going to leave somebody out, that's why the list keeps growing. But I believe in giving credit where credit is due. And the point to be made here is that she saw and they saw together something that would be beneficial for Kansas City, and they persisted in trying to achieve that goal until they succeeded. And those are skills that you can acquire in everyday living. And I'm glad they had them because it worked very well for us.
Can I add two thoughts, Greg? And the first is, it is interesting, though, if you look at the legal profession, it is one of the places where a discussion about civility really can be put on the table. And so, and Sly brought it up earlier. It's in certain parts of the law, it's adversarial. You're expected to be a vigorous advocate for a particular side, and somebody else is on the other side. But the idea of civility being folded into that as part of the profession is alive and well as a topic of discussion. And quite frankly, I think you can make extremely credible arguments that the law is at its best when you have vigorous advocacy, but civility as well. And so it's that sort of balance. I mean, it's interesting that that profession, that is probably one of the places where this discussion becomes tangible, and it certainly acts as an example for Sly and I think, as we move our way through the political atmosphere.
As mayors, what are your realistic, and I will point out that realistic is all caps and underlined. As mayors, what are your realistic expectations of support from Missouri or Kansas state governments?
Well, I think we ought to expect a lot of support. I think that if you look at both the state of Kansas and the state of Missouri, this region is an amazing economic engine for both of the states. And I think that it's extremely important for this region to articulate that critical role that we play in both state houses. I mean, certainly you all can help us collectively, institutionally, there are those that ought to, but we ought to be articulating a level of engagement that is equivalent to how fundamentally important what our region does for the state. And I think that, the beginnings of this, from what Sly and I are doing, can lead to a different kind of platform. The Greater Kansas City Chamber does this, the Kansas City, Kansas Chamber does this, but I think there are ways that we can articulate that and move forward in a way that asks for a higher level of engagement from the state houses and from leadership at the state level to take us to the next step. I mean, I think the bottom line for me is I'm not satisfied where my city is today. We're doing a lot of great things, don't get me wrong. We can do better, and I'm convinced that the way that we take Kansas City, Kansas to the next step is by working as a region to lift us up all together. I don't think it's much different with the states. If the states want to become stronger, and both of them absolutely need our economy to thrive in order for the state itself to become stronger than it is today, both Kansas and Missouri. And we ought to be entering into that kind of dialogue at the state houses. I think that's very exciting to me, quite frankly, because of the upside potential to that.
I agree with Joe on what he said. I think, though, that there is another aspect to the reality, and that is that federal funds flow to the states, and they're not flowing. Therefore, state funds are not flowing like they used to the cities. And I think that we have to learn as cities how to use and leverage our limited resources in order to get the biggest possible return and productivity. That's why a collaborative effort between our two cities is tremendous. And hopefully, and I believe, will be extremely fruitful, because we cannot count on the level of funding that we used to. Perfect example, Missouri Department of Transportation is no longer talking about building anything. They're trying to hold on to enough money to maintain what they've already got. That means that they don't have the money to do what they were doing, which means we won't have the money to do what we need to do. But we still need to get it done. So we're going to have to try to find a way to do that using different methods and methodologies. Instead of Joe building a wastewater treatment plant in Kansas City, Kansas, and one 3 miles away in Kansas City, Missouri, maybe we can find a way to build one together and share it, and that way we save some money and we can do other things. Here's another example. We've got animal control needs. We have one being built out east, and we need to build one 10, 12 miles away. It'd been nice if we could have shared that so that we could both share it, but there's issues as to why those things don't happen. We have to learn that we must count on ourselves in order to get to where we want to go. We cannot count on our leadership in Washington or on the state to provide us with as much financial support as they were in the past in the immediate future. But we can't just roll over. We've got to find a way to do that, and I think that collaborating, achieving economies of scale, finding ways to work together in order to economize on what we're spending and our resources is the best way to do that. I'm glad that we have a partner and neighbor to our immediate west that's willing to do the same. Those concepts are the ones that we can absolutely get our hands around locally and really start to move pieces together, and the upside potential can be great for us, and it's very, very exciting. I'll give one other example of where I think we can engage the state in a way that perhaps there's a disconnect today, and that's around education. So let me just give you the Kansas City, Kansas example of this that I think resonates throughout the region. So in the next 5 years, somewhere in the range of 3,000 to 5,000 jobs will be created in Kansas City, Kansas. All of those jobs, nearly all of them, are going to require some learning beyond high school in order for our citizens to take advantage of them.
The second thing is we just opened up a Sara Lee plant, a meat slicing facility. The largest meat slicer in the United States of America is now in Kansas City, Kansas. And if you buy Hillshire Farms meat, it's from KCK. And what's interesting about that is that's the blue-collar kind of business that KCK has really built an entire economy around, and it's the bread and butter of what we do today. 250 jobs in the plant. What I learned when the plant opened is when the meat comes in the front door, not one human hand touches the meat until it's in a box to be placed on the truck to be sent out the other end. In all of those 250 jobs, some level of learning above high school is required even in blue-collar jobs. We absolutely, in this region, have to work to have our educational level of success in every corner go up. And we've got to change the dialogue in Topeka to have a partner to say the way that we make the economy strong in Kansas or Missouri or this Kansas City region is we invest in our children to get them to the place where they can seize the jobs that Sly and I are working really hard to bring to this community, because we know that the likelihood is the next jobs that we bring here, if we're successful, are going to be ones that require our kids to be at a higher level of learning than they're attaining today. And that's the kind of thing that I think as we start to work together, we can articulate a different message in Topeka or in Jefferson City and ask for a real partnership here. Let's talk about how we really move this economy forward instead of how we need to cut everything in order to make them, to make the budget work next year. That's part of a vision I think that we can do collectively.
And I can tell you all, when you go to Topeka or when you go to Jeff City and you speak with the governor or either the state government, if you can speak with one voice on behalf of our region and not just half of our region, it is a huge impact to those folks. And they know when you're talking BS or when we really do have our act together. Well, speaking of schools, I have a tough one for you, Mayor James. I have lived in the Kansas City, Missouri public school system since 1966. I'm also a graduate of Southwest High School. So what are some immediate things we can do for this poor performing school district?
Well, we're doing some of them already, but some of the immediate things that we can do is to continue with the hands-on engagement of the public that we have had in the last few years. That has made a significant change in how things are being approached. Secondly, one of the things that we can do is something that I hope that we will engage in, and that is there are going to be opportunities to help children learn how to read and get up to grade level by the third grade coming up, and we need to engage in that. And I'm very keen on that issue because we know that your performance, a child's performance at the third grade level is predictive of a lot of things. When prison cells are being planned for 20 years out, they're looking at the performance of the third grade class to determine how many. Children have 80% of their learning capacity starting to develop by the age of 5. We don't even start to touch them half the time until 6 or 7. We're missing the boat. What we can do to make our schools function better is to prepare our children better to enter school. It is hard to learn when you're hungry. It is hard to learn when you come from a home where there is yelling and screaming or dysfunction. It is hard to learn when you come from a circumstance that doesn't value learning. And if a child is at the doorstep of school and they are unprepared to learn, then the school cannot on its own reverse that course. So if we truly want to have an impact on schools, then let's have an impact on families and people who have children, because it is at that level where the most good can be done. If you need an example, please read Whatever It Takes by Paul Tough regarding the Harlem Children's Zone and Jeffrey Canada. and his adventures in going and collecting pregnant mothers as they went in for prenatal visits and drawing them out and into a different circumstance and showing them things that they could do in order to facilitate their children's ability to learn, and then follow those children all the way through and find out that it's correct. So school is just a place where kids go. Families is a place where children really learn how to learn. And if we're going to have an impact on schools, we need to have an impact on families.
Right, it's hard to learn when you don't feel safe. Joe, do you want to add anything to that? And then we'll go to one last question.
Yeah, and I you know, from my perspective in Kansas City, Kansas, is again kind of looking at what the future holds for us and what we've seen happen. An exciting thing happened 2 years ago. We had 12 students from Kansas City, Kansas public schools, from about 3 of our different high schools, become Cerner scholars. And every day of the school year, for part of that day, they're actually at the Cerner campus and they're working with a team on actual projects at Cerner. And I was able to meet several of these students at Wyandotte High School last year, and I sat down with one of the students, and she was literally working on part of a PowerPoint that her team was going to present to their management the next day. That kind of integrating of learning with real-world business experience is something that for those of you in the Greater Kansas City Chamber, and I've talked to Cindy Cash of the Kansas City, Kansas Chamber, integrating business experience with our students in their learning is something that I know would be extremely valuable to their future. And there's a recent study that came out, Harvard did, called Pathways to Prosperity. And it was a study about how you get students ready to actually be out in the working world and engaged. And one of the areas that they said not many cities have figured out quite how to do successfully yet is this integrating of real business experience with those in the learning environment. And it's something that I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm hoping that we can work together to form real partnerships around, because I think the upside potential for that can absolutely be phenomenal and take students to that next level. We got to get them out of the classroom and into that business experience. Let them see what goes on in the places where you do business every day. It's very, very important for so many of our students.
If great cities begin with great leaders, I think great days are ahead. Will you help me in welcoming and thanking, our 2 mayors?
I was told that because of having home court advantage, that I get the opportunity to offer a comment, a few thank yous, and an invitation. First, the comment. On the pergola, the tower here at the university, we have carved 3 words: learning, leadership, and service. It's a tagline for us that we say we learn, we lead, and we serve in the Jesuit tradition. Truly today, we experienced learning what it's like to govern from these 2 gentlemen who are here before us. We are grateful and thankful that they, in fact, stepped up to lead, and how fortunate we are that they are in service as they are. Thank you, Mayor James, Mayor Reardon. A couple of thank yous. Thanks to our moderator here, Greg Graves, and to Burns. Dr. Phil has nothing on you, right? Oprah is next. Hi. Not only to Greg Graves, but to Greg's firm, Burns & McDonald, as a sponsor of this event, along with Peter De Silva and the UMB community in sponsoring this event, Jim Heater and Christy Wyatt for the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce for helping us sponsor this event. To the Rockhurst University community, while I appreciate the compliments that have been shared upon me, they really belong to our university community. The faculty, staff, and most especially our advancement staff and our grounds crew and physical plant have really been pumped and excited about having you here on campus today. And so my shout out goes to them for what they have done in bringing us together today. And lastly, the third piece is the invitation on behalf of Mr. James Castellano, our chairman of our Board of Trustees, and the several members of the board who are here, and the faculty, staff, and our university community. We invite you to continue this dialogue in the gallery of Massman Hall. The students more affectionately refer to it as the fishbowl. It is the room with the glass facing the Connert Commons. Thank you for being with us today. Let us continue to have a civil conversation about how to lead, to learn, and to serve.